Welcome to another round of Boardroom or Miro Board. Today we talk retrospectives with Agile coach Maria. Let's go. First question. You've spent 2 hours in a team retro, but the only input you've heard is Dave's. Boardroom or Miro Board?
Boardroom. In Miro, Dave can't hog the space because everyone can add thoughts anonymously, online, at the same time.
Correct. Next. You need the team to act on feedback fast, so you turn all those retro notes into Jira tasks instantly.
Miro all the way. And I can assign those tasks to teammates.
You're nailing this. Now, you see hundreds of sticky notes from the retro. A real mess. But you organize them into 5 themes in just seconds.
Miro, I basically get back an entire hour when I use its AI tools for clustering.
And she's done it.
Join over 60 million people running actually enjoyable and actionable retros in Miro. Get your first 3 boards free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.
All right, I am sitting in the Zoom room, waiting for someone to join, and that someone is Rob Bell. And this moment is a little bit like surreal as I just kind of sit here waiting. And yeah, I'm like 90% excited and 10% nervous, or the other way around. I can't tell anymore. But this is crazy. I'm talking to Rob Bell. There he is.
Is this Tom?
This is Tom. Is this Rob? Well, welcome to the Liminal Living Podcast. This is Dr. Tom Arundel, your curator of conversations around here. And today our conversation is fun. It's laid back, but it's also really insightful because I am listening to a voice today that I've been listening to for 25 years. This is Rob Bell. I don't think he needs much introduction because he is kind of, known in all of the circles that I've ever traveled in, and just a great voice of sanity and perspective. And today we talk about his newest book, Where'd You Park Your Spaceship, which is this really fun post-apocalyptic science fiction type novel. And it's just a really fun book, and this is a really fun conversation that takes us to places of life, death, grief, processing, framing, theology, heaven, hell. I think we talked about a little bit of everything. So I'm going to title this one, Rob Bell, Life, Death, and a Little Bit of Everything for all y'all here. So I'm going to set you loose with my conversation with Rob Bell. Dude, I've been hearing your voice for 25 years.
So have I. Guess we got that in common.
It's so awesome to be able to like actually talk with you, though. Yeah.
Oh, this is great. Where are you today in the world?
Oh, I'm in Michigan.
Oh, really?
Let's see. I live closer to Grand Rapids, but I work closer to Lansing. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard of it all.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard of it all.
Yeah.
And what is behind you? I love this wood behind you.
This, so I work in a very historical congregational church, and we built like additions on the church, and this is some extra siding left over from the addition in 1932 that was put on the church, and they had some extra for a renovation project that we did, and we restored this wall out there. They had extra. And I said, I want a backdrop of that stuff. So they made me one.
Yeah, that's cool. It's got a lot of life.
Yeah.
And history in it.
There's like dings and nail holes and all that good stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you? I see some surfboards and stuff in there. Where are you hanging out?
This is the garage in Ojai, California.
The garage.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Literally painting studio.
Okay.
There's a microphone. There's more surfboards. Surfboards in the ceiling, multiple surfboards. They're just everywhere.
Now, the difference between surfing in Lake Michigan versus, the Pacific Ocean, what kind of difference do you see?
Okay, surfing in Lake Michigan is absolute chaos. There's no order. There's no sets. It's just paddle out into insanity and then try to be in the right place for some particular slab of water to pick you. And like, don't smile in the parking lot, because if you smile too wide, you'll get grit, like you'll get sand in your teeth because the wind is blowing and there's jet skis and kayakers like flying around. It's just completely insane.
Yeah. We've spent lots of time as a family out on Lake Michigan. It's our happy spot. But yeah, I hear you with the sand and the wind.
You have to be seriously hardy.
Well, I started recording already because I wanted to capture my reaction of just saying, hi, how are you?
Good.
But
it's always the best. The best stuff is always. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I try to like over prepare and then not use any of the notes. So that's how I plan. So I got the anxiety. But what's your cutoff time? Just so I keep that in mind.
How long do you normally go?
My podcast, they usually go about an hour to an hour and 10 or 15.
Yeah, let's go for an hour.
All right. We can do that. Well, normally I like to talk about, the spiritual journey of the individual and maybe the story of them reimagining their faith and kind of the soil that their life has grown from. But like, you're pretty public and you've written so extensively on that already. So I thought I'd take a different angle with kind of an opening question. And like, you literally changed soils from Grand Rapids to Los Angeles, over a decade ago. So how has this soil of living in California shaped these last seasons of your life differently than Michigan might have?
Well, it's an interesting question, because you're right. Soil and geography are so huge in our lives and in our stories. I grew up in Lansing area, but my mother was from California, and we would go visit the Los Angeles area for Christmas. And I have very distinct memories of being 7 or 9. I remember we drove a Chevy to her that had been made somewhere in Michigan, because my dad was like, his mother-in-law needed a new car. So remember that, like the 80s or it could have been the late 70s when like good cars were made in Lansing and Detroit.
Oh yeah.
And then you would take it. So like, I remember taking her a pea green 1977 Chevy Impala. And I distinctly remember a deep, deep connection with the soil of California when I was like 7, like thinking that this is where I'm from, but my lineage was from there at like like my mother's side. So it wasn't just the sense that, and then we would come back to Michigan, which is where we lived. But I had a sense of that was the home, or I had 2 homes. So when I was in my early 20s, I moved to California, and I would distinctly remember I had this Mazda little pickup truck and like putting all my earthly belongings in the back, which at that point is like 6 duffel bags. You know what I mean? That feeling when you haven't accumulated anything. And moving there, and then in 25, getting a job in a church, and like a job. I got a job. Like, there's going to be a regular paycheck. It was like such a coming of age. Now they're going to I remember telling Kristen, like, there's going to be health insurance. Like, just this sort of, so back and forth, 2 trips there, 2 Michigans, 2 California. Like, there was a back and forth. Yeah, for sure. That something about, what was it, 12 years ago? Yeah, and that one was like, it felt more like a return than an exodus, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Felt like, oh yeah, we started this in our early 20s, then went to Michigan, and then went back and almost like picked up something that I had. very strange. I don't quite understand how all that works. But yeah, huge, huge. And something about following has always been following what's next that I can kind of describe and kind of can't. Mm-hmm. Some sense of the next chapter is there. Next chapter is there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed how many people you can explain it and you can't. It's a known and unknown. There's a paradox. They just know this job. They're done at this job. And it's a good job and nothing's wrong. But they're done. And everybody's like, well, what's the scandal? Like what happened? No, actually I'm just done. Yeah. And that's okay. That's most people only know divorces. They don't know graduations.
Yeah, you graduated.
Like you leave because it blew up, not because something within you rose up and asked for expression and said, let's finish this chapter and let's go start a new one there.
Mm. I like how you put that.
It's fascinating to me.
Graduations. Like, from my vantage point, I kind of grew up in a fundamentalist, charismatic tradition in Metro Detroit area, and I remember just listening to your messages. I'd download them on CD and I would listen to them in my car. I would put them onto on the overhead speakers at work when I was there alone, and I would just listen to them there. And then we started driving out, my wife and I, and we would just kind of drive out to your church on a Sunday night and just catch one live. And kind of watching, as I said in my email to you asking if you'd talk, it's like you cracked a window in the room that I was in that I called, my entire worldview was this small little, I remember, I don't remember the message, but specifically you were talking about like the First Thessalonians passage about, the rapture passage. And then you're like, actually, in the culture and context, this is a king coming in, and you're like, and I remember it being like a 20-something-year-old and being like, wait a second,
right?
You can rethink this stuff? Like, and so you like opened a window for me and just kind of let some fresh air in, and you've been just doing that. And kind of from my vantage point, like your life has been like these series of moments of just saying yes to the next thing, yes to life, yes to the next invitation, to opportunity. But with the yes also comes like a releasing, like that trapeze artist who like lets go of the one swing and they turn and they're like just suspended in space before you grab hold of the next thing. And it's like you're letting go of the older self, your previous mindset, your previous thinking, everything. I'm no longer who I was. And like, you just make it look easy sometimes, from our vantage point of just saying yes to the next thing. But what has been the biggest challenge when you're in that liminal space where you have said yes to life, you've released the trapeze, swing, you've turned, but the next one hasn't come yet? What's been the biggest challenge for you in that space?
Oh, God, Tom, what a great question. I would describe it like a death. And so you get better at death. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah.
Like you almost like you have to feel all the feels, and one of them is disorientation. And generally there's something in there about how we're going to pay the bills. Like those are all that you can't like the, and it's giving yourself the freedom to feel all the feels. And I come from a tradition that didn't. You just keep going. You're going to be fine. Just denial is my drug of choice. So after a while, you start to spot the pattern, and then you at least are like, oh yeah, this is the part where I go, what am I thinking? Who thought this was a good idea? And you go, oh yeah, this is the part where the voice of this could really not work. Like this could really not work. So it's almost like you make friends with all those voices. And instead of the tension of, is this like the dumbest thing ever? Is this like going to be a giant regret? You come to see all those tensions as signs of life. Yeah. This is almost like this is how it works. Or somebody around you who doesn't understand. It's okay. Yeah, I barely understand. So I would say the first thing is you begin to see this is how it works, and you develop a level of a kind of trust. It's the kind of trust where you can actually say the most terrifying thing. Okay, so imagine like a marriage, a long time marriage, and all of a sudden one day out of nowhere there's a discussion, it gets a little heated, and one of the people says, well, if we're going to stay together, we're going to need to like change the way we do this or that. And it's like both of them go, oh my God, did you just say that? If no one's ever said if we're going to stay together, there's never been an if we're going to stay together. And so you, the observer, are like, a thing has been spoken that's never been spoken. You would think, oh my word, are they even going to stay together? Is there something horrible happening? But you, the observer, also know, actually, this is the best space they've ever been in. They're actually probably getting to the root of issues with a clarity and honesty they never have. So it's almost like speaking the unspeakable that we've never considered, but somebody actually said it, which strangely enough bodes very well for the health of the system. So all of the like, I don't know what this is, but it won't leave me alone, and something is asking me to follow it, and so I'm going to start giving it energy and time and see what it is. Becomes, you speak it, and then you follow it, and you see what it is. But yeah, it like a death. And you also see, like when you think about beliefs, it's just thoughts. Like you were saying, the tradition that you come from, that to a certain degree idolized beliefs, almost like fetishized beliefs. They're also just thoughts, and they drop you if you inquire about them. They're actually in the way, because they teach a person that you are what you think, and your thoughts are a thing going on in there's a larger I amness to each of us.
I like that.
The sense we have of an I, and the sense we have of somebody here is having some sort of human experience. That's about what we know. So you just begin to see that thoughts, you can just, like the rapture. Yeah, you can just drop that. You can inquire about it. It's almost like you don't drop that thought. You inquire about, where did that even come from? And in inquiring about it, it drops you. So self-inquiry, is this thought even true? Do I know for sure this is true? This thought is causing me great suffering. Could I just stop having this thought? So a lot of it's just literally clearing up what's in your head.
Yeah, because we're taught to like live in our head, everything.
Yes.
You're given the correct questions to ask, you're given the correct answers to have, and then you're given the correct data to argue your points of those questions, and then that's your framework. And when someone opens a window, it's like, wait, there's an outside.
Yes. yes. So your question is so great, because it's an endless succession of there's an outside. Oh, there's actually an outside to this one. Oh, there's actually an outside to this one. Oh, there's actually an outside to this one. So even the person is like, yeah, but I have rent. Like, that's nice, but I have a mortgage, I have to pay rent. You might just go, well, have you done a Google search of jobs that along with the job comes housing? Because camp, working in a summer camp, working in a college, like there are a number of jobs that provide. So even like that thing, like, okay, that's nice, but I have to put a roof over my head. Well, just a very straightforward question. Have you ever done a Google search of jobs that include housing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you just know, crack the windows, crack the windows, crack the windows, crack the windows,
Yeah.
crack the windows.
So it's like reframing something with a larger frame and then a larger frame, and then realizing, why do we need, the frame can help us focus and it can help us see, artistically in the moment, but the frame isn't reality. The frame doesn't capture the entire world of everything. There's a life outside of the frame as well.
Right. There's a great artist, Robert Irwin, who pioneered a light and space movement in the 50s and 60s. He actually died a couple days ago at 95.
Oh, wow.
But he started out painting canvases, and then he started getting rid of the wood frame and doing just canvas wrapped on a wood frame. Then he started noticing the way that the wall that the frame was hanging on affected how you perceived the painting. So he stopped using paintings on frames and started doing like light sconces. So his artwork became lights mounted on walls, but then he began to notice that the way that the light was mounted affected how you saw the rest of the room. So he started changing around the formation of rooms to see how that changed your perception. And then there was a day when he sold all of his stuff and shut down his studio because even that was too limiting. And he drove around the country in a pickup truck, meeting with art students, asking them about their time and their soil and their space and what they wanted to make and how could he help them give expression to what was arising within them.
Oh, wow.
But his entire evolution was like, you're just moving from change the frame, get rid of the frame. Is it even paint on canvas? It's light on a wall. Is it even light on a wall? There's one exhibit he was given at a museum where he was given like a room. And so he didn't do anything to the room. It was just like an opening instead of a door into that section of the gallery. He just put a piece of black tape across the floor at that part of the space he was given. And security guards who worked in the museum were like, was that support beam here before? People who worked in the museum were like, it's amazing what you did to the room simply because he put a black piece of tape on the floor to demarcate the space that he was given for his exhibition. And that became the exhibition. So you could see this in other spaces, what you're talking about, where the framing and the framing of the framing and the framing of the framing of the framing, the story that you're telling about the story that you're telling about the story that you're telling about the story, you just discover that your true nature is peace, and your true nature, there's a divine I am that all of us are experiencing that is eternal, infinite, indestructible, the Christ within you. Like different groups and traditions have different names for it, but you're actually fine. You're fine in ways we don't even realize we're fine.
I do a lot of funerals. It's one way that I can really serve the community here that I'm in. It's a small town, 1,500 people. And I don't know, I have like this knack for doing funerals because I've realized how much ungrieved grief there is in every soul. And I just get up and I talk about grief and what it is and what it's going to do to you. And then, just give people like friendly spaces of like, you can just hold the grief. This is what here's all the emotions you're going to run through. And here's what you do with those emotions. You just recognize them as there's a friend with a message to give you in this moment. And it's overwhelming because everyone's talking all at once. You got all these emotions and we perceive some as negative and some as positive. And they're just like this whole big swirl. And every single time I've done 25 funerals this year so far. And every single funeral I've done, from atheist to, the most committed church-going, older woman to, I just did a 2-day-old infant, a teenager that died in a car crash. I do the same thing. I personalize it for each one, but I do the same thing, and I just tackle the grief. And every time, every single funeral, someone comes up to me and says, that was the most helpful thing anyone's ever said to me. And
yeah.
Because we don't know what to do with grief, and yet we have it. We're not even taught it's okay to look at it. You know, we set it in, it's like, we'll do grief in the funeral home or in the hospital or at the cemetery, but then we leave and we're supposed to go do life again. And we don't understand that, you know, grief goes with us. And a big theme in your book is this ungrieved grief that just, you know, it carries through this main character, his life, and like him working it out with all of these different teachers that come along and help him and support him along the way. And, you know, I noticed that is like, is that the main theme that you were like trying to get at, or did that just weave itself in there in the writing process?
The only way it works is to just follow the story. And then later, well, doing an interview with you, you find out what it's about for people, or you find out what it's about for you. If you start with, I want to write a story about grief, it doesn't work, because then you, the reader, it's like you're watching a movie and you already know what the point is. You're like, oh God, okay. Love people who aren't like me. I got it. Yeah. You're just like, just eye roll. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I did notice right away in the writing that the character Heen, and I do remember making some editorial choices about it's only going to work if you are with him long enough that when the quote unquote action kicks in and he starts to feel, you have to have been with him long enough that you feel what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember there was a note from somebody about who'd been in publishing for a while, who was about, you got to get to the action sooner. And I remember like sitting with that and thinking, nah, you actually have to you just have to go with him. Because that, and I love this, it made me laugh so hard when he starts to feel it isn't like euphoria and a transcendent oneness with all living beings. What he feels is absolute supernatural irritation at this guy named Dill Tudd,
yes,
who acts like they're friends and has these weird speech patterns.
Yes.
And just appears out of nowhere. So when he starts to feel what he feels isn't, he just wants to hug everybody. He feels just like,
yes, I hate this guy.
Yeah, going back, what is this guy? But you said something that goes back to another question that you brought up. Part of the moving from chapter to chapter and season to season in your life is that they're just emotions. Like there aren't like positive and negative, good and bad emotions. They're emotions, they're truth.
Yeah.
They're your body, spirit, essence, cells, soul telling you the truth about what's happening in you. Even fear, like as a kid, like the knife is sharp, the stove is hot. This radar system that is your body looking out for danger, that's how human beings even are still here. Is we're like, is there a lion in the bushes or not? Very important question.
Yeah.
So like the powerful thing you're doing when you go, yeah, you're at a funeral, you're feeling remorse or maybe even regret or an absence or an ache or love. You might be feeling love more than affection more than anything. Yeah, all of it. Yeah, welcome actually to being human. Yeah, this is the game we've been playing the whole time. Somebody somewhere along the way just like put like a what is it when they kidnap somebody? They put a thing over their head so they can't see. It's like somebody along the way was like, no, those aren't good. It's like it's almost like you're re-educating people about what it means to be human.
Yes, because a part of being human is dealing with loss and grief. But that's one that we relegate to the closets of society.
Right. And you're like normalizing. Yeah. And like even like my dad died earlier this year in June.
I'm sorry.
And I came to Michigan, and like the 3 days of visitation and funeral and burial were just like so surreal. Like, you're at your dad's funeral, and you're also like, what the, am I at my dad's funeral? This is my dad's funeral? I remember like the third song that they sang at my dad's funeral, I would be like, am I sitting at the front row at my dad's funeral hearing them sing a song? What? It was like so sort of out of body. But it also, he is, I feel him more closely than when he was alive. Like, it cleared up a number of things. It like, there was great love between us. I was going to say he was complicated. I'm complicated. It's complicated. But he turned into like this smiling wingman who's just like so happy to be along for the ride. Somehow there's like a presence and absence that reconciled a whole number of things I had in my head about him.
Yeah.
So even in the grief of him dying, something so powerful happened about my thoughts and connection with him that I just go, the thing that everybody dreads, that is the worst thing that can happen, well, okay, fine. It also happened to do a wondrous work of reconciling in me.
Yeah.
So good luck trying to plan or figure out all that. But like, I can only imagine people in those funerals are like, what is my life about? What does matter? Who am, like, how do I treat the people that I claim to love? Like, there's a lot of life happening in my, like, years ago when I did funerals, like it's like, God, this is where, talk about people waking up. I'd be like, yeah, half people are crying, half people are going, I'm not actually gonna make very different choices about my life going forward.
Yeah, it's a very liminal season when you're in grief. But what you said, that you feel like your dad's presence still. There's a quote I read at every funeral. It's from John O'Donohue. He's an Irish poet and philosopher. Love that guy. And he talks about how when we lose someone to death, they transfer from physical presence to invisible presence in our life.
Yeah.
And they actually, I say, so then I remind them, there's going to be times where, you're going to do that thing that you always did with that loved one. And you're going to think, gosh, they're not here. They would have loved this. I'm like, say those words out loud. They would have loved this. Or you're going to see, somebody smile and you're like, oh my gosh, you look just like grandpa right now. Like, say those words out loud. This is the invisible presence of your loved one still with you. They have shaped your neurology. They're a part of, they're not just a memory, like a picture in your mind. They are actually a part of your emotional, psychological makeup and how your brain is actually wired. Their invisible presence is like, it's real. It's not like this Hallmark kind of a thing. It's very real. They're a part of you, and they become, so when you feel that closeness to someone after they've passed, it's almost like they're inside of your skin, inside of your brain now. It's like, and they're closer, and you don't have some of that. Sometimes you're afraid to say the thing to the person because you're not sure how they're going to react. And so there's like the hesitations and there's the barriers. And when they pass, those barriers don't exist anymore. And they are like fully present, and you're fully present with them. Yeah. And that invisible presence is, I'm trying to help people see that. It's
absolutely
not just gone. They're here.
Yeah.
And he says the part of the healing of grief is the tuning in of our hearts for that change from physical presence to invisible presence as the healing path that grief takes you on, is that you tune into the invisible presence because you have been so accustomed to the physical presence.
Right. And whereas before they existed, your perception told you they existed outside of you. There they are in time and space. They're over there. They're at their house. They're coming over to my house. They're at work. And then they also, of course, live within me and how they reside in my heart. And when they pass, now, at least in this whatever realm or arrangement, they're just in my heart. For now. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? And they're maybe somewhere laughing, going, remember when we were on Earth? Remember when we were in that arrangement? We were like, death is the worst. They're laughing like what a funny setup. Who knows what sort of freedom or liberation or communion, where they're like looking at all of us like, oh, sweetheart, still trapped in the dream that somehow there's a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was the opening band. That was the warm up.
Yeah. It seems like that's what grief is kind of expanding. It can be an expansion of that mindset for us.
Yeah. That's profound that's really, really compelling how you help people with that. That's really, really great. Man.
Yeah. I was with a man in hospice. He was a good friend of mine. He had a blood disease, and he was almost like he knew he was going to die for 15 years. You know, he knew it. And so he had to live with the knowledge of I'm going to die because I have a terminal blood disease. And he made it a long time. His name was Jim Putnam. And I got to know him for the last year of his life, became really good friends with him. And I remember I visited him in the hospital, and things were really rough for him at this moment. And he just kind of, he was like totally drugged up with like morphine or all this stuff to help him. But this bout of pain overcame the morphine. He sat straight up in bed. He hadn't said a word since I got there, even opened his eyes. And I'm just sitting with him. But that bout, he sat right up. He looked right into my eyes, and he says, man, death is easy. Is dying, that's the hard part. And then he laid back down, and he was out again. That's the last words he ever said to me. He died that night.
Whoa.
And I was like, holy cow, changed my life. That's like one of the most profound last words moments I've ever had. It's like, that'll stick with me everywhere.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Because it's that dying process, this grief process, there's so much in life that is going to leave you. There's so much in life that's going to fade away. And then there's so much that's going to come. And it's like living in that open-handed realm where life can come and life can go, and you're not going to grip down on it. That teaches you, as soon as you grip down on something, then life stops because you can't receive anything in a closed hand.
Absolutely.
You know, and
you think about like your body at a cellular level. Some estimate that around 1 million cells die in your body every second.
Wow.
But your body is continually making new cells that somehow know how to be Tom. Like you're not suddenly becoming your neighbor Gary.
Yeah.
So there's some sort of strange consistency to this life and death, but it is happening at a rate of millions of times every couple seconds within the human body. So there are these deaths, but then the body is also in that death able to somehow keep giving birth. And so, as I know you've seen, for so many people, life and death are two modes. You're alive, and then you die. Like there's this one, then that one.
Yeah.
But like at a cellular level, they are two realities that intermingle within a third reality that can hold them both. So for so many people, life and death are ultimate. They're the extent of the playing field, as opposed to two different experiences and phenomena that are happening within a larger playing field known as reality. So then every person who listens to your podcast will probably eat today, which requires something being pulled from the earth and harvested, which means killed. So the very act of eating is entering into death and life. And then you have the seasons. Nobody's angry with fall and winter and summer and spring. So I just often wonder, like everything around us, life and death sit side by side. Yeah. And yet in this one particular dimension of life and death, we panic, we beat our chests, we shake our fists like tiny antennas for anger. Why did so-and-so be taken? Which is all very normal and human. Yeah. But why were they taken so early? Why were they? And yet in every other area, if you extracted death from the process, you wouldn't have a process.
That's interesting. It's just a part of existence. It's ongoing.
Absolutely. And so then you have to go, wait, if death is a part of existence, its counterpoint we would call life. So there actually is a reality that is neither of those two, that those two are actually happening within. Which, because your body, you would just say, yeah, this is my body, this is my life. And yet within your life and in what you would call your body, life and death are two things happening within
simultaneously
your body
at the same time. Like right now, I am living and dying. Wow. Yeah, my brain just kind of like exploded a little with that one.
Isn't that one? I had this fascinating, there's a fellow named Deepak Chopra who talked a lot about this. He was and he started out as a doctor, and he and I were talking about this, and he says, and he has this very crisp way of saying things like, Rob, there is a moment when a cell has died, and then there's a moment when a cell is produced. And he says, do you know what that moment is called? That moment is called resurrection. It's like millions and millions of resurrections all the time happening within your body. Miraculous.
Wow.
You are a living, walking, cellular resurrection process happening millions and millions of times a second.
Wow. Leave it to Deepak to blow your mind up. Wow. A part of life is death. A part of life is saying yes. And then that brings about the deaths. When you said yes to writing Where'd You Park Your Spaceship, were you as surprised as some of my other friends when I said, hey, I'm interviewing Rob Bell about his new book? And they're like, oh, what's it about? And I was like, post-apocalyptic sci-fi. And they're like, huh? Really? I'm like, yeah, that is. Was there a moment where you were surprised? Like, okay, I guess this is the next thing.
Yeah, surprised, not surprised. But yeah. Like in the middle of the night, this guy's asking this guy, where'd you park your spaceship? And I was like, what? And then you sort of fall back asleep. Like, what was that? But in the morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I had at the time, like a little notepad in the house we were living in, like where you write like eggs, bread, like don't forget to get the tires rotated, that sort of, but I just wrote, where'd you park your spaceship? And I remember thinking, I realize now this is the moment. I realized, well, so this guy is asking this guy, where'd you park your spaceship? How does he feel about this question? I'm in like an interview or a conversation with this weird glimpse of and I prior to that, I'd written a couple of plays and one other novel. So I'd had some experience with a story arising like kind of on its own. But then it was like, well, what's the one guy's name? Keen Gruber's, GRU-BARES. And what's the other guy's name? Oh, Dill Tudd. Well, why are there spaceships involved? Are they even on Earth? Oh no. Well, what happened to the Earth? It like just became this, and within maybe, I don't know, a couple days, weeks, that notepad in my closet was like filled. It's like on page just filled with all these bits and pieces. So I had to give myself this permission to like almost like let it arise, let it come in, to follow it, which goes back to what you said about identity. And if you cling to something, but this isn't what I do. Well, it is what I'm doing. I'm literally standing in my clothes closet making another series of notes about names. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Well, this isn't what I do. Well, it's what I'm doing. Um, so even a sense of identity gets super bendy and flexible. You're a pastor who does funerals, but there's a village elder role you're playing there's a liturgical dimension. There's some people would say that like there's a shamanic dimension of understanding all the energies that are bottled up in people because of grief, and you're almost like giving all these energies a space for release. You know what I mean? Like we could see what you have a knack for. There's a therapist would be like, my God, this is like the best group therapy session. You're like a master at taking people through these stages as a group. Like, so even like a sense of, if you were to cling to, no, this is, in that moment, you're just in the moment being Tom doing this thing that you do. It's almost like the idea of a title is like almost like ridiculous. Like, you guys have to understand what my title is.
Right.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
Sometimes I even forget to mention it.
Exactly, because it's silly. It would be like the ego going, hey, look at me over here. A little separation, a little thing to cling to that separates me.
Yeah.
Gives me a sense of worth and validity, when all the action is in just following it with this group of people in this time. So yeah, that was a huge part of it, was like, no one may ever read this. This may just be something you're working out that you don't even, perhaps you're just working out years of stored up grief. And that's all this is a personal exercise. Okay. It's like, just had to surrender all outcome. And even beginning knowing, taking that to a publisher and being like, hey, this is my new book, to be like, this isn't a Rob Bell book. And I can just already picture myself going, but it is a Rob, like I'm Rob Bell. Like there isn't a Rob Bell other than this Rob. I literally remember thinking, I already know how that conversation would go. I just am not interested. That conversation sounds exhausting already. So maybe I'll just put it out myself. We'll see. And then I do remember the first draft was 750 pages, showing it to a couple of friends.
Oh, wow.
And one friend said, he's like, the other books were like, they were helpful. But he's like, this is what it's like to be your friend. And I just remember I remember in tears, just like, that's how it feels. It feels like I'm getting, like, all of it was a warm up for this. And especially when I was like, oh, wait, I know what happens in book 2. Oh God, of course, book 3. Oh, book 4. Like, it started to grow. And then I was like, oh, obviously there needs to be a t-shirt that just says in big letters, you messed with the wrong series 5. I was like, all of a sudden, like, all the sort of inside baseball got, like, you know what I mean? It's like a world started to emerge and just expanded. And it had like a, wow, that would be really, really, really enjoyable to do that. That would be like, I had almost like too good to be true. I had to, no, good enough to be true.
Like, for me, reading it, the book almost divided itself into 2. You know, you have and it almost felt like Richard Rohr's 2 halves of life in the story, because you had, you know, Heen's very young, you know, in school, he's learning under Sir Pong, which I love Sir Pong character. He was really fun. And like, you have this, he's teaching, but he's also learning the container. He's learning, you know, okay, this is how the world works and this is my place in it.
Right.
And then he's sent off into that world to fulfill the role that he's been given. And then, you know, like, and then all of a sudden life hits him really hard. And then the second half of life comes in and he has a new teacher. Sir Pong was his first teacher, did a great job. And then he has this new teacher that irritates the snot out of him, whereas Dill Tud comes in and he has a new type of teacher. And so it almost, for me, is like, this is like the two halves of life here. And there's two types of teachers. And,
oh, wow.
you know, Sir Pong was a great teacher. He taught him, you know, creativity and curiosity and learning and character within a school context. And that was great. But then Dill Tud comes along, piddle, piddle, piddle. Here's some rosemary. It's like, this is a teacher? You know, it's like,
right.
And then he is the second half of life teacher for Heen.
Yeah. And he's even like that thing he said about black and white and how it all, he's like, I'm sure there was something profound in there, but he's also probably just insane. He shouldn't be wandering the paths unsupervised.
Yeah.
Like this is doing something to me, but I also he has like a deep cynicism about, what is this guy? Should this guy even be loose and free in the world?
Yeah. I loved seeing him wrestle with Dill Tud's character and then finally coming to endearment. Like, you know, he's like looking for him now. It's like, where is he? When am I going to see him next? And it's like,
yeah,
it's just, yeah. And it seems like when that second half of life hits, whether it's through tragedy or awakening or whatever it is that wakes you up to the second half of life, you can be like really irritated in that moment. Like, no, I've built my entire life to be this and be here. Yes. And this is what it's all about. And now life has come in and I'm supposed to say yes to what? I'm going to write a sci-fi novel. Like, was there some kind of like a moment for you where you're like, no, I can't do that because I do this? Or was it just taking you along with it and you are just used to saying yes to life now and you go?
No, I there is something that my work, there's something about teaching that at its heart, you're explaining, you're like pulling apart, you're parsing, you're this over and against this. There's something about that, how would you say it? Explaining energy. This is what we're talking about. This is what I'm saying. This is almost like, this is my thesis. This is another example. This is a thesis. By the way, this is a thesis. Here's another example. Mm-hmm. Here's another way to say it. Here's a way you could think about this in your life. By the way, here's the thesis again, just in case you missed it. And there's something about this story that explaining would ruin it. It was like you just set aside all that. And there was something about, I did that for 30 years, almost like like the books and the sermons had this, which was great, but it's just like there was some coming to the end of a thing energetically where just throw yourself into the delight of the story. And then I had friends right away who were like, I think this is like the best teaching you've ever done, whatever your little speech was about how but it was something about, you don't have, there's a weight in that it was like you don't have to carry that weight if you don't want. It was like a very tender, innocent, just follow the story. Just throw yourself into the delight of it. Then, of course, partway through, obviously, Tom, I was like, God, my characters give so many speeches. Oh, gee, what a surprise. But then, yeah, fine. They do. Fine. Just, I give up.
Yeah.
Or when the character Nord writes a play, and I was like, well, I wonder what his play is about. And then he writes a play called What's a Nucka, which is the name of a play I wrote that I published. And I was like, oh my God, NPR is rolling its eyes somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, really? They're like, you could, the play that's referred to in this book is an actual play that you could like go get a copy of. Like, that's so sort of but something about it was like, yeah, that's how I do it. just double down on the ridiculousness of it. Yeah, for sure. That had like a, almost not like a get away with it, but like, yeah. Some of it had like some, you're too far. Yeah, I don't know if you can get away with it, but you're too far in. And look at the joy this is bringing you. Look how it's accessing. Like I would write, literally, I just finished recording the audiobook here in the garage, which is like 12 and a half hours long or something. But there were multiple times to this day, and it happened in the audiobook recording, where certain scenes I can't get through them. When he gets back from searching for the boy, and he falls and sustains that injury, and it's just chaos, and they're like, wait, is that a piece of your tongue? And it's just, and all of a sudden he feels Bobby Freelance holding him, and he's like, I got you, brother. Like, it wrecks me every time. And recording the audiobook, I like get so teared up and emotional reading certain scenes, and I was like, do I stop and collect myself and then hit record again? It's like, no, because if I was just reading this to you, this is what would happen. Like, it's an actual reading.
Yeah.
So even all the way to the recording of the audiobook, this like, God, the word that keeps coming to mind is like a vulnerable, tender, exposed, unprotected armor in the closet feeling of, no, just no, you know exactly what to do here. You actually do know what to do here, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Just trust it. You're fine. You're fine the whole time.
I actually, when I was reading the book, your voice was narrating it in my head. And you would laugh just like that too. When you would get to a funny part, it would laugh in my head. Like, I could totally picture Rob laughing at this part right now. So, because I listen, your podcast, you'll say something and it'll just bring you like so much joy. You'll just start laughing in the podcast, and like, that's the voice that needs to read this book. So I'm glad that you did that.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, there's some funny stuff in there. There's some difficult stuff in there. There's just so much interweaved joy and wisdom. I like the speeches that they took there, because, it almost felt like I'm reading, like a Love Wins or a Velvet Elvis or Jesus Wants to Save Christians again, but from a higher perspective. Like you're on a spiral staircase and you've been learning this stuff your whole life. And then you're going up the staircase, you're revisiting certain things, but now from a higher perspective and now in narrative form. And I'm like, oh, I recognize this, but somehow this is more real. Do you see that stuff too? The number of interviewers and reviews where the person is like, wait, this is real. Like, this is fiction, but it's like I just noticed how many people are like, wait, what is happening? I know it's fiction. I get it. It's other planets, but why does this have get to me? And you might find this as hilarious as I do. I had a book come out in 2011 called Love Wins. Oh yeah. Which was essentially, for most people, heaven and hell are discussions about someday in some other place, what might happen. And that the origins of this, particularly in the Bible, are about the kind of world we're creating right now. Like hell is a state of consciousness. Hell is separation, isolation. It's indifference. It's that. So the whole book was trying to drag what is a conceptual, how do you have your mental furniture arranged about sometime, some other place, what might happen, and arguments, literally in interviews about that book, that the person would say, what happens when you die? And I'd be like, are you asking me to speculate? Because everything about that topic, the way you have it framed,
no one knows.
Right.
And so I just kept trying to say that even the teachings of Jesus, heaven and hell, he in Jewish consciousness in the first century, and the entire consciousness of the Bible was pretty much only ever about this world, economics, politics, and that to talk about the dominant ways people hear about heaven and hell basically skip over the very real heaven and hells right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I would literally do an interview, like say that, and the interviewer would be like, yeah, wow, that's really great. So where do you think Stalin is? You know what I mean? Like, it's like they couldn't help but just drag it back to speculation
Mm-hmm.
about sometime, some other place. Then 12 years later, a book about an imaginary world sometime, some other place. Pure speculation. On Amazon, if you buy the book, I think the category is called literally speculative fiction. And in those interviews, every single interview goes immediately to grief, ecology, different economic arrangements, governance,
Mm-hmm.
how we become numb and begin to feel again.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just I give up. I just give up.
Well, I mean, your earlier works were talking about the ideas, but reframing the classic ideas in very helpful ways. But then when you get into narrative, you touch on something very human. It's like what Hamilton, the play, did to the history of the person of Hamilton. Like, I don't cry when I read a history book about Alexander Hamilton, but I saw Hamilton live here at the Wharton, and I didn't stop crying.
Yeah.
Because they take a story, they take facts, history, people, places, but then they tie it, wrap it around, give it flesh, and they make you fall in love with the characters, and you feel what they feel, and you cry when they lose their son, and then you cry even more when they reconcile after. It's like it's wrapped in humanity in that point, and that's why I say it's from a higher perspective. It's like you finally got
and
that.
There's like a duck. There's like a image. You're so true. Like the spiral, and this image of duct tape comes to me of all these bits and pieces that we pick up along the way, and we just integrate. They like become a part of how we we come across something that's new and novel and like disruptive and whoa, kind of blows our mind.
Yeah.
And then it gradually becomes integrated to the point where it's simply how we see the world, and we have a hard time remembering when we didn't see the world that way.
Yeah.
And then this is like drawing on all these earlier Robs without even I didn't once have some thought like I ought to bring in that. You know what I mean? It's just there was some connection with the subconscious that a story like this does, where you're not even aware at some level of what's happening. In the same way that in the middle of the night, your subconscious, unconscious, your mind creates short films that it plays for you that it came up with.
Yes.
This had elements of that, like or even Easter eggs or callbacks that later in the book would be like, wait, I didn't plan that to appear again. I didn't lay this out. And yet that is and doing these interviews has been super trippy. The first half and second half of life, no one's like, every day somebody points something out that I'm like, you just become aware of, I'm witnessing to it like you, I'm witnessing to it a bit like you are. Like even the ego of, I made this, it's a little fuzzy because you're like, I don't know, because Tom saw a bunch of stuff that I sure did put in there.
Right.
It's like you can see like Bob Dylan in that Scorsese film, No Direction Home. He's being interviewed by the British press, and they're all in their suits and very uptight, and they're asking him these very formulaic questions. And like, when did you decide to stop doing protest songs? And Bob Dylan's like, who said I ever started doing protest songs? Like he's just this collection. Like you said, you can't cling. They're clinging harder to his sense of self than he is.
Yes.
He's almost like a collection of atoms and molecules and cells just whooshing through the frame.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and these songs are coming through, but he's not. It's almost like he's like just a tube. They're just flying through him out into the world.
Yeah.
And so they're like trying to, and they're like, why do you think the youth respond to your music? And he's like, I don't know. Why don't you ask them? Like, he's just almost like, don't blame me. But you sang the songs. Well, don't blame me. I was just standing there.
Can I read an excerpt? There's no spoilers in here. I didn't want to do any spoilers for anyone, but there's an excerpt in here that I think it's like we're touching on something you already wrote about, and it's a conversation that it says love must be incarnated in time and space. It brings his hands together until they almost touch, and to do that, love must empty itself of its infinite, boundless formlessness in order to be present in bodies between people, and that feels like this work. It was a work of love, not just fun ideas, but you incarnated all of your ideas into a work of love in this book in time and space. And, ideas can be like very formless, and all of a sudden you bring it all into a book with characters. You incarnate that love into a story, and then you hand it to people, and then they read it. And that love is incarnated in different ways for different people because, I'm a different human than you are. I have different upbringings, backgrounds, and thoughts and all that stuff. So I see it from a different angle, and, I pull different things out here and there. So I think that's what you're experiencing. And when you talk with people about this work is you're experiencing the different incarnations of love that it is to these people.
That's very helpful. I can see that.
Yeah. And I really like that line. I was like, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to say it. Make sure I say it.
Wait, but here's what's interesting is when you attribute the quote, you could just say it straight up, but you could say like, as Bournes says.
Oh, yeah. When
like,
Bourne said this.
Right. Peebles' life partner. You could just quote it like he's a real dude.
He conceptually is incarnated in our minds with truths.
Right. Yeah, he's real in here, Peoples. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what that makes it.
Yeah. A lot of people that I've told about this book were surprised that you wrote like this sci-fi novel. They're learning Earth history in the beginning part of the book. What happened to the Earth? And you're almost describing the present in that their history is our present. It feels like it's very present and real. It's like, and you call this, brown balled the Earth, where they, we just pretty much destroyed the Earth. And you talk about poverty, and there's a lot of political, economic, agricultural mistakes that are pointed out in the beginning part of the book as they're studying Earth history. And I guess with the shit show that we are right now as a people on the path, and there's so much destruction, and there's war, and there's just, there's a lot of nasty stuff. What gives you hope for us collectively right now?
You and I are having this conversation. You did 25 funerals this year where space was created for people to grieve ungrieved grief. Like, the news isn't the news. The news is an algorithm feeding us outrage and tragedy. And when we click on those articles, then the internet sends us more of those articles. Whatever we click on, we are saying to the internet, this is what I click on. So it's the news that I chose to be given to me, but I could choose other news. I could not choose that. I could not even call that news. I could call that what it is, an outrage, scandal, tragedy, algorithm, industrial entertainment complex. So I just see lots and lots and lots of people realizing that we shape the world. So like a grocery store, somebody put food on the shelves. Well, what food did they put on the shelves? Well, the shelves, the food that they put on the shelves is the food that they know to put on the shelves based on the buying patterns of the people who go into the store. So the grocery store is both separate from me, and I also am the grocery store. If we didn't walk in there and make those choices, then what's on the shelves would be different. Or if we didn't go in there, there wouldn't be a grocery store because it wouldn't stay in business. So all of these things that appear to be separate are actually wholes, WHOLES. So you can see any global conflict or war is an amalgamation or it's a buildup of a much more intimate interior conflict that just escalated. So when people grieve ungrieved grief, when we clear up our thoughts about certain things, when we discover that our true nature is peace, like you talked about, when we acknowledge, there was a first half of life and now there's a second half of life, all of this insight and clarity and reflection and learning actually changes the world. So the question about hope is, for many people, the interior and the exterior are two different things. There's me and then there's the grocery store. Two separate things, interior, exterior. But when you come to see that the exterior is merely a reflection of the interior, get a group of people together who are at war within themselves, they'll probably, if they get enough of them get together, create a war among themselves.
Wow.
So like I look at all of the larger stuff that people go, or even at the most basic level, everything that makes up carbon-based life forms on planet Earth that make like a human body. A human body is made of elements, literally the same elements that are the creation around us. So even when people talk about the environment, you're talking about yourself.
Yeah.
So care for myself and growing awareness of my own connection to the soil around me is how the earth gets saved. There isn't a vague, large earth out there that needs to be saved. There is only all the endless little choices that you and I make every day. So every time you and I see our empowerment and make all those little different choices, that's actually the world healing. So hope for me is not a question about how it out there is going to turn out someday. It is simply in this moment, what's the next interesting, compelling, beautiful, true thing I could step into?
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why I somebody like you who's like specifically in these spaces that you help create and grieve. Yeah. Like anybody who's like, how come nobody's, I'm like, well, there's this guy named Tom. So anytime anybody says like, how come no one wants to talk about blah, 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 I'll be like, but you do. So your question actually shoots itself in the foot. The person asking the question is the answer to the question.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I see it. It's not a conceptual brain. How is your furniture in your head arranged regarding what's going to happen to the earth someday? It's like, well, of course, if you keep it stuck in the mind, you'll have despair. And then you have this thing in your pocket that you can open up and get a constant feed that's literally billions of dollars have been spent to make more billions of dollars on feeding you a particular thing. Like every single person who complains about the Kardashians, I just say, who? The Kardashians. How do you know about them? Because the only way you know about them is you clicked on something somewhere. You told the internet, this is what I'm interested in. Stop clicking.
Oh, man.
We create this thing.
Yeah.
We create it, and we uncreate it.
And we uncreate it. Well, I appreciate how you're uncreating things and creating things. And, and then helping us see how to do the same thing. So thank you for helping us do that.
Oh, I'm so glad we talked.
Yeah, me too. It's been 25 years coming for me.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, this has just been such a joy, and I appreciate you coming on. And I like to get the voices that have shaped me in front of some of the people that listen to me. And it's like, well,
that's so cool.
If you like,
by the way, I've so you can tell your friends, because this makes me laugh. I haven't read science fiction.
No way.
I've years ago I read some of Where'd You Park Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
I do remember reading some of that and loving it. So I guess maybe that's science fiction or comedy or British or whatever.
It's a British something.
Beyond that, I'm not sure that I've read. So even when I started reading this, I wasn't like, ooh, now I'm doing this genre.
Mm-hmm.
That's because someone said, one interviewer was like, except for da-da and da-da, what makes this a work of science fiction? And I was like, why are you asking me? I never said that.
Oh, I read it as a science fiction. I do enjoy the genre, and it's like space travel, and it's fun. I put it into that category in my own brain.
Yeah, and I had that thought, I wonder if this will end up being classified. But even that, just holding all that loosely,
yeah.
Who said,
But it's
protest
unlike
songs? Who said they were protest songs?
Who said this was a sci-fi novel? It really is unlike any other novel that I have read, sci-fi or otherwise. It was like reading a Rob Bell book, and yet reading a sci-fi book, and it was neither, and it was both.
Oh,
I'll be honest, it took me a couple of chapters to get used to it. I'm like, okay, this is a Rob Bell book, and this is a sci-fi book, and it is both, and it is neither. And then I was like, I got the cadence for it, and I'm like, all right, and now I'm carried away.
Well, that's like you. It was a funeral, but it was like a therapy session, but it was like a group catharsis, but it was like a very intelligent, heartfelt teaching about the nature of reality. And it was also an experience of embodiment, like I was in my body. And it was also like taking a walk with a village elder. Yeah. If people can't classify you, probably on the right track.
Well, can I close with a short little reading? It's a quote that I loved, and I just want to read this. And you wrote, "I feel like one life just ended, but the next one hasn't begun yet. Like I'm in between." Bournes strokes his beard. Ah, yes, liminal space, an ancient word for threshold. You've left one room, but you aren't in the next room. You're crossing the threshold, so you're in neither room at the moment. All sorts of good things happen in liminal space, as long as you don't rush to get into the next room. Probably my favorite quote of the whole book.
Oh, good old Bournes.
Good old Bournes. I loved his character. Well, thanks for not rushing into the next room and letting it cultivate.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Great talking to you.
You too. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Liminal Living Podcast, where we share stories and practices and perspectives for those in that liminal space that we talked about here today with Rob. So you can head on over to robbell.com to check out everything that Rob has. Grab that newest book. It's a lot of fun. It's a great read. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, and it'll make you wonder. And that, to me, is a good book. And it was a good book. So next week, we have another great conversation. We're diving into the book of Revelation. with theologian Professor Scott McKnight. So hold on to your hats for that one, and we'll see you next week. Peace out.
Welcome to another round of Drawing Board or Miro Board. Today we discuss technical diagramming with systems architect Maya. Let's go. First question. You've spent 10 hours slogging over a sequence diagram that should have taken 5. Drawing board or Miro board?
Drawing board. And if I'm being honest, Miro would probably cut that time down by half. You know, with its AI tools and ready-to-go templates.
Next, your diagrams become so bulky, it's more complex than the solar system. But all it takes is a few clicks and...
It's Miro. I've used those technical shape packs way too many times, and stuff is just digestible on its infinite online canvas.
Now, the final question. Everyone's brought in, but you have to make all these tasks all the way over in Jira. But wait, it's done. Is it...
Miro, easy with its two-way Jira sync. Easy to plot dependencies. Everyone always knows what's up.
And she's done it.
Join over 60 million people creating technical diagrams without workflow glitches. Get your first 3 boards for free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.